Okay, so what we're going to do is look at the Ariel Poems by T.S. Eliot. This will be a companion in some ways to the reflections I did, T.S. Eliot and Ash Wednesday. Eliot, like C.S. Lewis, came to Christianity in the late 1920s, early 1930s. Eliot, unlike Lewis, was much more engaged with the literary, liturgical life of the historic church and writing about it. In his Ash Wednesday series, there were 6 parts to that. And in this series, are the Ariel Poems, 6 parts. Very important to recognize that in terms of the numbers, 6 is always the number of imperfection, 7th is the number of the Sabbath rest. And so what Eliot is doing, both in the Ash Wednesday poems and then these Ariel poems, is pointing out that we are on a pilgrimage, we are on a journey, but we certainly have not reached our destination. And between the end and where we are now, there are struggles. There are issues to face. There are disappointments. There are betrayals. But we fare forward on the journey. What I'd like to do in probably 6 little sections here, 5 minutes each, just lightly touch on each of the Ariel poems and see what Eliot was doing within them in this Advent season. Ariel, very important to understand. Ariel is a Jewish word, which can mean Lion of God, but given the fact Eliot was very fond of Dante and Shakespeare, he's probably using Ariel from The Tempest. And Ariel was rescued by Prospero from the witch Sycophants, which kept him locked in a tree. So Ariel plays a very significant role in terms of why Eliot used Ariel is the title of his 6 Ariel poems, which were done between 1927 and 1931. And the final one was done much later. It's called The Cultivation of Christmas Trees. They're all quite different, and yet, in fact, they're integrated. So, I'll start. The first of the Ariel poems is The Journey of the Magi. Now, why would Eliot start with The Journey of the Magi, which would seem to be, if we're dealing with Christmas, why not the child Christ in some ways, or why not Mary, or there's a variety of other themes we'll get to. But first of all, the Journey of the Magi is obviously what Eliot is suggesting, is that within the notion of general revelation, the idea where there are thoughtful women and men who are contemplatively open to the inbreaking of the Logos, the word or the embodiment or the incarnation of something in time, they're the ones who can see sometimes better than those who claim to have all their theology, philosophy, exegesis locked up in a tight little tank. And so the first of the Ariel poems is The Journey of the Magi. The Magi were, in this case, men who read the constellations, the epic vision that can be articulated through the stars, the speech that comes from the stars, as well as philosophy and reflecting on wisdom and insight. But it's one thing to talk about the general platitudes of these. It's quite another thing to understand the inbreaking of what is occurring in history and being sensitive to that and responding to it at any given moment. So the Magi were alert to the fact that something was occurring. They picked it up in the reading of the constellations. They had reflected on it, probably in significant works of philosophy, Asian thought, and it was they who followed the star. And so you get the shepherds and the Magi representing wisdom and insight of the classical world. The shepherds, often those the most marginalized, neither fit within the framework of standard Jewish thought. And so the Journey of the Magi begins with a cold coming we had of it, or further on, a hard coming we had of it. It's the story of them traveling places of comfort, of affluence, of security. But on that particular journey, it was difficult. The camels were the riding, the people they were assisting them with, they would often bolt and run. The weather was not good. And so it's a story in many ways of people between the vision that they have and the difficulties and the frustrations and the irritations of embodying and following where the vision is taken. So Eliot is articulating in The Journey of the Magi the nature of the Magi living in this tension between ideal, givenness of insight and wisdom, the journey to the place of fulfillment of wisdom, but in fact, a huge struggle is engaged within that. And so the journey of the Magi, and we'll find this in all of Eliot's other Ariel poems, is breaking out like Ariel himself from the trunk with Prospero into the life direction they're being called to take. And yet that is not an easy one. Just because a person is called does not mean it will go easy. And so the journey of the Magi continues, as I said, and in the midst of the disappointments, the frustrations, the natural, with the voices singing our ears that this was all folly. So often the vision is given, the frustrations and the challenges that come, and you begin to think, is this just folly? Why am I doing this? This is ridiculous. I could be going to places where life was much more at ease and comfortable. But the Magi continued the journey. And as the particular poem moves on, they have returned from their trip and they're reflecting, or this particular Magi is reflecting, on was it worth it? It was a one-off experience, and yet they realized there was a birth, and yet for them it was a death. It was a death of their understanding of themselves, a death of how they understood reality. And so there is this complex reflection going on in the Magi, or what Eliot is getting at in the journey of the Magi. They're different people because of the birth they saw, but the birth itself was their own death. The death of how they understood wisdom, how they understood insight, and how it changed their lives in the new the dispensation they returned to. No more at ease, as they said, and as Eliot finishes this, no longer at ease here in the old dispensation with an alien people clutching their gods. I should be glad of another death.